It's the area of the slaughterhouses in the south of Munich, which historically had been built in 1876 to 1878 by a famous architect called Zenetti. And due to hygienic reasons, Zenetti had the task to move the slaughterhouses from the inner city to then the edge of the city in those days. And this slaughterhouse district, with its butcheries and its cattle halls, runs through a very interesting transition in future, because parts of that area are closed down already. The cattle halls are closed. It's called Viehhof areal in Munich. And a new cultural layer started to exist in these old halls, in that framework. And we have a lot of grassroots initiatives which started to build environments in that area.
I think it's a very interesting area because it's an area that is about death, about killing, but it is also about nurturing and feeding the city and its inhabitants. And as you already say, it is a kind of a contained space that is made accessible in a very particular way.
One of the conditions of that district is that there are walls still existing, and they had been, to me, the only chance to develop new movements in a semi-hidden space. Because if that structure would have been totally open in that district, it would have not been accepted by the citizens living next doors.
Yeah, that's an important point because it also shows the power of the built environment. This is linked to actions and to possibilities. And it's interesting to see how these walls and fences are used. They are kind of used to paint on them, to express messages, to articulate critique, to leave a signature.
So there is somehow something like a architectural unforeseen protection structure which helps to keep new movements in the district. And tearing these walls down now will mean that you lose that protection as well.
And walking through the Schlachthof, I always have a feeling I'm walking through a kind of a patchwork situation where you have patches of nature, you have signs of creativity, you have graffiti, but you have lots of signposts regulating the behavior. And I think there's still that very strong legacy of the history of that particular space. So if we compare this to the Isarauen, it's a completely different feeling. At the Isarauen, you have some signposts, but it is about openness. And I think these signposts are very telling. There is still this approach to try to regulate human behavior in that type of space that is kind of also now a bit unruly.
Interesting enough, there are two futures of that city quarter. On the one hand side, there is the reality of planning of the city municipality, who is trying to change that whole area into a housing area with a public park on the site where new movements, urban gardening and artists achieved to open that formerly enclosed situation. So these artists and these citizens had somehow a catalyst function in this area to open that scenery. And now the city municipality works somehow a bit against it. But on the other hand, there's a strong movement from the citizens in the quarter itself to keep some of that subversive culture.
The charm of the place is that it is in transition, that is still a place in the making very much. So it is not 100% clear where that place will go or in which direction that place will develop. And for me, it's a bit of an oxymoron that you try to convert or to keep a place in transition as a static place. By trying to do this, you already lose it.
So this is going to be a real interesting question. How can planners, how can sociologists and anthropologists, politicians, citizens achieve to somehow reach a transition which does not lose a character of a city quarter on the one hand side and is still open enough for a future development? How can we support a transition in such a sense?
Comparing the Isarauen and the Schlachthof, I think we can use the animals to point to the differences, but also to the similarities of these places. As we see in the pictures and in the ancient photographs, there is this big cow and there are the animals very prominent. Today they seem to be gone, but this legacy of animal space, even if they were slaughtered, is still very strong.
You have the truck cleaning place, and you have the rest of cattle stands where they had been kept outdoors, waiting for the transition to the other side of the street to be slaughtered there. Slaughtery avoids to show you the killing, yeah, and to show you all the sad history about this cattle which is transported into the slaughterhouse. So this is totally undercover. And I think this is a very interesting aspect, that our food production is something which is hidden and is not shown because it's cruel.
It tells us a lot about our society and about our values and how we negotiate food, how we make food visible, to which extent, and what we actually want to know about food. And at the end of the day, it is about slaughtering, dying, living, nurturing, feeding, all these terms that might seem to be a contradiction in the very first place, but they are absolutely entangled with each other and still have a presence in the infrastructure of space.